the dimension of no self. If I ask you, for whom are you living, what would be your response? Surely you will say, I live for myself. Then the question is, what do you mean by myself? You will say, it is my individual self, which I call I or me. It is the core of my being, and I live for that. This core or self in me is commanding me to satisfy its desires. You can see this. My whole life is a process of satisfying inner desires of me, the self. All thoughts and desires arise from this core. In my ignorance, I take my desires for granted. I never question them. I impulsively obey them and act to satisfy them. To me, the self is true and real. Why should I question its validity? But the question remains, is there a self within this body at all? As long as I live within the self, within the ego, it seems true to me. It is like a dream. A dream is true as long as you dream. But the moment you awake, you realize it was only an illusion. This I is the image of the person I have built for myself. I was not born as a person. It was a later development in the process of growth. It has emerged and grown in me, and finally it has taken control of my mind. It has occupied my whole being. With the formation of self, so many problems of living have arisen. Have you observed that life is a problem to almost all the human beings? This is because of the self. Self is the root of all such psychological problems. Let us take a few examples of these problems, which we can call existential problems. Wanting to continue itself is a major existential problem. I want to continue, live forever. I don't want to change. Out of the struggle for self-continuation arises the fear of ending or the fear of death. Every person is feeling insecure. It produces a fear, constantly arising questions in the mind like, how can I keep myself going? How can I continue to be a product of the problem of insecurity? The self knows only to continue. We are afraid to end. The self does not know how to end itself. So we avoid at all cost facing end. All what I want is to continue my existence as it is. Another problem arising from the self is the demand to be fed and nourished constantly. The self wants to be bolstered by praise, reward and recognition. If not done, the self begins to fade away. This explains why people are so greedy for acceptance, prestige, praise and recognition. I have to keep my ego feeding constantly by fulfilling its wants and wishes. When not done, frustration sets in and I am compelled to satisfy it. Here, we are trying to identify the problems arising out of the self. Another problem is the demand for certainty. I seek for certainty in every aspect of life. But in reality, every kind of certainty I rely upon betrays me finally. I cannot set my foot on anything in this world. Wherever I keep my foot to stand, it shrinks underneath. There is nothing to hold on, nothing to cling on. My last resort will be the self. So I constantly assert myself saying, yes, I am real, I exist. But the truth is far from it. The self is also unstable and you cannot hold on it. It is changing all the time. Have you realized the constant struggle to keep, protect and feed the self is a wastage of life? Why waste energy trying to actualize a false image? It is a fruitless attempt. You can never make it real. See in this truth. Can I realize that there is no self, no person, no mind at all? There is no person herein. If you go deeply investigating into the nature of the self, perhaps at an unexpected moment you may realize that there is no such thing as self. With that realization, the self drops away. The mind ceases to be. A new consciousness then opens. It would be an opening where you may utter aha in amazement. This new consciousness is free of all existential problems, untainted from all defilements of the mind. It is a dimension of complete freedom with no trace of fear, frustration or uncertainty. All the mind-made divisions, separation, disappear into one whole reality. You unite with the whole universe. The earth, the sun, the moon and all living beings are one, inseparable from each other. Everything changes but not it. It remains as ever. You may call it the cosmic consciousness or Brahman or Nirvana or Tao. But the name does not matter. Once this consciousness is open, you cannot separate yourself from it. You are that. The self dissolves away. The energy which was confined to the activities of the self is released. Then you come back to your true nature, true sense. The wholeness which you have realized is so full, boundlessly full, that nothing can be added to it, nor can anything be taken away from it. Even the death is not a loss to it. The realization of self changes your views of life and the way you lived. Earlier, the purpose of living was to fulfill the self's desires. In its struggle to achieve fulfillment, man has reduced himself to a wolf, so rude, so selfish and violent. It is the root cause of war, destruction and violence on this beautiful earth. Now, with the opening to the cosmos, the purpose of life becomes to live fully each moment. In that oneness, the whole life reveals itself like an ever-blooming lotus.